Have you ever wondered how ancient cultures justified the invisible lines on a map or the strict rules that govern their households? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly incredible excerpt from the Mahabharata. You see, this ancient text doesn't just list dry historical facts. It brilliantly illustrates how ancient societies used epic and frankly wild storytelling to explain the very origins of their social rules and geographical borders. We're going to unpack a specific mythic case study about reviving a royal bloodline and what it tells us about power, family drama, and the literal birth of nations.
Now, to really grasp this story, we have to start by setting the scene with a massive geopolitical crisis. 21. According to the text, that's the number of times the warrior class, the rulers and protectors known as the Kshatriyas, was completely annihilated. They were wiped out by the great Rishi Rama, son of Jamadagnya, in revenge for his father's death. Just try to imagine the scale of that destruction for a second. He swept across the world with his battle axe and swift arrows, destroying the ruling class over and over again.
Section 1. The warrior class extinction, a massive power vacuum.
So this apocalyptic massacre left the Earth on the brink of total collapse. To resolve this macro-level crisis, the surviving royal Kshatriya women sought out wise priests, the Brahmanas, who were highly skilled in the sacred texts known as the Vedas. The text makes a really clear point here. They didn't do this out of lust, but purely from motives of virtue. They literally had to rebuild the warrior class from scratch to restore order to the Earth. And this massive societal shift is the exact backdrop that brings us to the wild micro-level case study the text uses to illustrate this process.
Section 2. A curse in the womb. Family drama unfolds.
What's absolutely fascinating here is how the text uses intense, deeply personal family drama to explain the origin of one of these crucial Brahmana sages. We aren't just reading about high-level politics, we're reading about an ancient scandal. Meet the players in this complicated ancient love triangle. We've got Utatya, a wise rishi. We have Mamata, his dearly loved wife. And then there's Vrihaspati, Utatya's younger brother, who happens to be the highly energetic priest of the Celestials. Vrihaspati approaches his sister-in-law Mamata with romantic intentions. But there's a major complication. Mamata is already pregnant. And not just with any child, but a child who has already mastered the Vedas while still inside his mother's womb. Talk about a precocious kid, right?
This next part brilliantly illustrates that unique blend of myth and morality. In a truly dramatic twist, when Vrihaspati refuses to back down, the unborn child literally speaks up from inside the womb to block his uncle's advances. The baby says, "O father, cease from thy attempt. There is no space here for two. I have occupied it first." The child is fiercely guarding his space, trying to prevent Vrihaspati from carrying out his desires in what the text wryly notes is already a very small room.
Well, as you might expect, Vrihaspati does not take the rejection well. He is completely furious at being thwarted by a fetus, so he retaliates. He curses the unborn child to a life of blindness for speaking to him that way. And because of this incredibly specific, intense family dispute, the boy is born blind. He comes to be called Dirghatamas, a name that literally translates to enveloped in perpetual darkness. This isn't just some random disability. In the logic of the myth, it's the direct result of a celestial clash of wills.
Section 3. The blind sage's exile, cast out from the asylum.
Now, despite his blindness, Dirghatamas grows up to be a formidable figure. He fully masters the Vedas, marries a young Brahmana maiden named Pradweshi, and has several children. However, the text tells us he learns some pretty unconventional practices and fearlessly adopts them. His fellow sages are totally indignant at this breach of propriety, and they literally cast him out. But the rejection doesn't stop there. Facing a brutal domestic dispute, his deeply dissatisfied wife tells him, "Thou hast been blind from birth. It is I who have supported thee and thy children. I shall not do so in future." She is completely done carrying the financial and social burden. She points out that a husband is supposed to support and protect the wife, and since he does neither, she completely rejects him.
So, how does Dirghatamas retaliate? He doesn't just argue back. He uses his spiritual authority to try and change the very fabric of their society. He proclaims, "I lay down from this day as a rule that every woman shall have to adhere to one husband for her life. Whether the husband is dead or alive, she must remain monogamous or be considered fallen." It's fascinating, isn't it? The ancient text impartially shows us that massive, sweeping social laws, like strict female monogamy, were conceptualized not as divine decrees handed down from the clouds, but as bitter, deeply personal retaliations in a domestic dispute.
As you can probably guess, Pradweshi is absolutely enraged by this oppressive new law. She doesn't just sit back and accept it, she takes extreme action. She commands her sons to get rid of him. The sons, exclaiming, "Why should we support this old man?" literally tie the blind sage to a raft. They throw him into the waters of the Ganges, committing him to the mercy of the stream, and head back home without a second thought. The blind sage is now completely abandoned, just drifting down the river.
Section 4. King Vali's Royal Request, a Need for Offspring.
So how exactly does this desperate, lonely exile tie back into our macro-level geopolitical crisis? Remember that Kshatriya extinction we started with? Well, the blind sage is drifting along the stream, passing through the territories of various kings. Eventually, the raft reaches a monarch named King Vali, who happens to be bathing in the river. Vali pulls the raft in and saves the old man. But it turns out, King Vali has a major problem of his own. He desperately needs an heir. When he learns he's just rescued a highly powerful Rishi, he asks Dirghatamas to raise up virtuous and wise offspring upon his wife to help perpetuate his royal line.
And this part brilliantly illustrates the complex class dynamics of the time. King Vali sends his queen, Sudeshna, to the sage, but she is completely insulted by his appearance. Seeing that he is blind and old, she flat out refuses to go to him, and secretly sends her nurse instead. The suitor nurse, however, obeys the king's order. Because of her obedience, she ends up bearing the sage 11 incredibly powerful children, including the great Kakshivat. These kids grow up to study all the Vedas and possess immense power.
Of course, the truth eventually comes out. King Vali sees these 11 amazing, powerful children and asks the Rishi, "Are these kids mine?" Dirghatamas bluntly replies, "No, they are mine. Your unfortunate queen insulted me by sending her nurse." When King Vali realizes he's been tricked by his own wife's prejudice, he immediately pacifies the angry sage. He apologizes and makes absolutely sure that Queen Sudeshna finally goes to him personally.
Section 5. Birth of 5 Kingdoms, a bloodline restored.
Now we zoom back out to the macro level, to the exact moment where mythology transforms into literal geography. When Queen Sudeshna finally approaches him, Dirghatamas doesn't even need to do much. By merely touching her, the powerful Rishi blesses her. He declares she will have 5 children, glorious as the sun himself. Through this seemingly miraculous, effortless intervention, the blind Brahmana sage officially revives the Kshatriya royal bloodline for King Vali.
And here is why this deeply matters. He names these 5 sons, Anga, Vanga, Kalinga, Pundra, and Suhma. These boys didn't just inherit a family fortune. The text explicitly tells us they became the founding fathers of 5 distinct historical kingdoms that took on their exact names. The ancient map was literally drawn from this one dramatic family tree. You see how perfectly this text ties everything together? It wraps up by stating that this is how the line of Vali was perpetuated and how mighty bowmen and great car warriors sprung in the Kshatriya race from the seed of Brahmanas. From a terrifying massacre that wiped out the world's rulers 21 times, to a cursed pregnancy stemming from a celestial love triangle, to an exiled blind man floating on a raft, this single, chaotic, epic narrative masterfully justifies exactly how the ancient world's power structures were rebuilt.
It is just a breathtaking way to explain the world, and it leaves us with a fascinating question to consider as we wrap up this explainer. How do modern societies use their own foundational myths to legitimize borders, bloodlines, and social rules today? I mean, we might not blame a cursed pregnancy or a blind sage on a raft for our current laws, but we certainly rely on grand narratives to explain why things are the way they are. What are the stories we still tell ourselves today to explain our own world? Thank you so much for exploring this amazing text with me, and keep questioning the origins of the world around you.